Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Using a PMO to Recession-Proof Your Business. I'm Kevin Iguano, I'll be your host for today. This is one in a series of webinars that we run regularly every 2 weeks, roughly, throughout the year. And today I'm pleased to say our host is Hussain Bandukwala. Hussain is an expert on forming and improving PMOs, project management offices within a business. If you don't know what a PMO is, it is the organization that often governs projects and project managers, sometimes set standards, sometimes they report on portfolio health to senior management. There's lots of different functions of a PMO. I'm sure Hussain is going to get a little bit further into that. What I'm going to ask you to do is hold your questions till the end of the presentation. You will have the opportunity to ask questions at the end. Now, to help you so you don't forget, what we ask is that you type your questions into the questions window or the chat window on the web interface, and at the end I'll read them out and have Hussain answer the questions. This is being recorded, and the video will eventually be published on YouTube. Hussain, take it away.
Thanks so much, Kevin. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate everyone joining us for this session. I wanted to go ahead and, take some time to learn a bit about you, all those who have joined our session so far. And so what I would love to do is in the chat, if in the chat you could let me know, why are you here today? Why are you interested in PMOs? Are you a PMO sponsor? Are you setting up PMO for the first time? Are you setting up a PMO for the nth time? Are you optimizing your PMO? Do you want to become a PMO leader one day, or you're a project manager within a PMO? What brings you to our webinar today? If in the chat you could let me know or let Kevin know, that would be wonderful. Kevin, I'm getting it.
So you can type your questions in the chat window or the questions window, depending which web interface or cell phone interface you're using. So we have Ranjit is saying to get insights on changing trends. It's one input.
Okay.
Maria says to learn more about running a PMO, I am new.
Okay. Fantastic.
Okay. Harpinder says, I'm running a business and I need to figure out how to make the business a little bit more resilient.
Great, fantastic.
I simplified that. It was a longer question or a longer comment.
Response. Okay, no worries. Thank you for that, Kevin. Well, over to the next question is, what is your own project management experience? Are you new to the game? Have you been dabbling in it for a bit? Are you a pro, or do you not engage in project management yourself?
One more response from the previous question from Ken. It says, looking for best practice advice to optimize the PMO I am part of today.
Okay, fantastic.
One person said, new to PMOs, but long-time project manager.
Okay, great.
Another said 10 plus years.
Fantastic.
Ranjit says, I'm a professional who builds 0 to 1 and scale PMO offices.
Okay, fantastic. Great. Kevin, I'm going to skip the next question, but I want to go ahead and get into this one. Do you think that a recession is coming?
Me personally, we just lived through one, and I hear every day on the news that we're expecting another economic downturn.
Right.
Ranjit says it's already here. I guess it depends on your industry and what you're doing. Absolutely.
All right.
Harpinder says, I work in healthcare. We've been in recession since COVID hit.
Right. Right. Very true. Well, I mean, I would argue that in that situation with COVID, healthcare has got a boom instead of a recession. So within more of an economic upturn, in my opinion, than a downturn.
That may be more common about morale, what they've been going through.
True. True.
Ken says they're always coming. Cycles are forever.
Right. And so for the current situation, wherever you are, do you think that your company is doing anything about it? Anything about it? Yes, no, maybe, don't know.
Kirsten says don't know. Roberto says we just got through COVID and the company reset itself up to survive COVID, so it's more of the same.
Okay.
Ranjit says yes, growth being the focus. They are doing more with less.
That's fantastic. I'd love to learn and hear a bit more about that. Any other responses, Kevin?
No other responses on that question.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll go ahead and move on. So really appreciate everybody responding to those questions and sharing a bit about yourself and your situation. The reality is that, you know, whether it's a recession or because of some other situations, whether it's company's own internal economic downturn, there are a few areas that it must focus upon, right? And so I try to boil those down into 5 different recession-proofing essentials that I'd love to talk about, right? The first one is improving operational efficiency. The second one is instilling workforce agility. The third one is controlling expenditures and managing cash flow. The fourth one is increasing personnel throughput. And the fifth one is strengthening internal communications, right? So if you are focusing on all or some of these essentials, whether it's a recession, whether it's an economic downturn, whether it's some other challenges that your company is or industry is facing towards, and viewing it as an opportunity to really reflect, shred, build, and bounce back, you can go ahead and come out of the economic downturn much stronger, much better, perhaps leaner, but even more ready to take on the good times that are going to be coming ahead, right? So what do I really mean by all of these 5 different essentials, right? So if you look at, you know, improving operational efficiency, what are we really focusing on? What are we talking about? Well, the reality is that when you're looking at things statistically, most organizations go ahead and just shred people. They let people go. They rely on aggressive headcounts, but based on past data, historical information that other industries and institutes have taken, stats have shown that organizations that rely more on improving themselves operationally compared to those who let people go perform better, right? And so what can a PMO do to help in this situation? Well, one of the things that PMOs and project management generally do is make things better, more efficient by focusing on processes, by focusing on workflows, by focusing on tool utilization, by focusing on improving productivity. And so this is an opportunity for the PMO to partner with the operations departments, the IT departments, other functional areas in the organization to look straight ahead, look forward, and understand, okay, what is it that the organization can do, what those different functional areas can do to do more with less, to do something, whatever they have, do things faster and better, right? How can we go ahead and do quick audits and provide quick assessments, go ahead and make sure that they're able to go ahead and provide even small improvements so that they can go ahead and, you know, get from start to finish faster, go ahead and cut down barriers that aren't really needed, simplify processes that were otherwise complex, and utilize whatever they have at hand and do things better, right? So one of the things that other organizations, the other departments, when it comes down to economic downturns, is that they're focused on making sure that the urgent gets taken care of. Well, some of these things that the PMO, that through the PMO we are talking about, can be urgent, but a lot of them are probably important. And so using this as a time and being proactive about bringing these things to light to the operations team, the IT team, and other functional areas, and working with them hand in hand to make things better is where PMOs can be super powerful, right? So number one, focusing on improving operational efficiency for the organization is something that a PMO can absolutely help with. Moving on to the second recession-proofing essential, which is instilling workforce agility, right? Now, with a sort of a on-demand workforce model where you can go ahead and utilize resources on and as needed, can be extremely helpful for any organization. So you don't have to worry about employment costs, you don't have to worry about golden parachutes, you don't have to worry about letting people go. You are going ahead and keeping a lean core working staff and then add on as needed staff for other needs, right? And so that means that as a PMO, you can focus on what the resources organizations are. You can help work with HR, work with functional areas to understand what their needs are, and be and work as an engine for not only managing the resource capacity and utilization based on skill sets, based on seniority, based on skills levels, but at the same time, working with staffing partners and getting the right people on board, right? So those are things that either the PMO can take the lead on or partner with HR and talent development to work through that. That in economic downturn times can be extremely helpful to go ahead and make sure that money is not lost on sunk costs, that we're not losing people and reducing morale of the organization, but rather we're using and leveraging our partnerships, our skills, and our resourcing that are on the bench and going through the turbulent economic times for the organization. The third recession-proofing essential is controlling expenditures and managing cash flow, right? Now, this is something that obviously seems like pretty common sense, but we all know that when projects go over budget, when things don't get prioritized, based to the nature of the needs of the organization, when you're not keeping a track of both internal and external costs, which is something that should be there, but I know that many organizations don't keep a track of them. Making sure that having actual cash at hand and keeping a tight track on expenditures and controls, forecasting those things can be extremely good practices and good hygiene for businesses to survive and thrive. All right, and so the PMOs here can really help with two things. Number one, making sure that the right things are happening at the right time by the right people, in the right way, right? So the prioritization of initiatives as needed, especially if an economic downturn is coming. What is the absolute important and urgent things that need to be focused on, and what are the other things that can be either paused or stopped completely to make sure that the organization is focusing on what really needs to happen to further strengthen itself and grow from a position of a back foot at the moment. And then secondly, if there is a lack of skill or even lack of practice of tracking costs on projects, then instilling it immediately to make sure that a proper track is accounted for. Another piece area that they can focus on is working with accounting and finance departments to correlate accounting and finance-based accounting-based costing versus project-based costing, and making sure that there is good synergies between those two as well, right? PMOs again here can take a proactive approach on making this happen. The fourth recession-proofing skill really is to make sure that the organization is increasing its personnel throughput. So doing more with less, making sure that the organization is performing better, making sure that the teams that exist currently on the ground are working cross-functionally, wearing multiple hats at the same time, right? Now, especially in situations of economic downturns and recessions where people are let go, what really that means is that people are actually continue to do what is expected to do, but now we have fewer people to do that. So if you're in an organization with a lot of project managers, chances are that the first people to be let go are project managers and program managers. And whether your core focus business is engineering, whether it's marketing, whether it's tech, whatever it is, it becomes some core functional area that is now required to focus on all the project work that's going on as well. And so if engineers and marketers and software developers or HR folks are now required to go ahead and lead projects, do they really have project management skills? Should they be running projects the way that project managers should usually do? It's really important in these situations that these cross-functional resources are trained on project management, and PMOs can take a leadership in that. It doesn't have to be the whole gambit of running projects, but the essential basics: on time, on budget, on scope, how to manage that, how to proactively manage risks, how to report on projects, how to create some rock solid project schedules and work through that. That is important. And at the same time, partnering with HR to see if there are any cross-functional training opportunities, so that again, the same people that are within the organization, that are still within the organization, become a bit more well-rounded, so that they can do more and be able to achieve effectively and with quality what others in the organization could do, should they be still around, right? So again, working with HR here and also being proactive and providing project management knowledge and training to those teams can really help increase their throughput. And finally, strengthening internal communication in times of economic downturns. People are on the edge of their seats. When they go ahead and see some of their peers let go, they hear rumors, they are always on an anticipatory mode, whether it'll be them that's going next, or what is the company doing to make sure that it is safeguarding the best interests of the people. Being transparent about what are the layoffs, what is the company doing, what can it expect when, can really help people feel safe, know what's happening, and try to get engaged as well. So it's important to have a strong communication plan that the PMO can help the organization with. But at the same time, the PMO can really act as a conduit, as a facilitator to get feedback from staff and report that pulse to the leadership as well. What are the people thinking? What is the morale like? Where is the people's focus? can they actually do more, or are they nervous whenever they come to work? And share that with leadership, so the leadership can then again respond that by further improving their communication or taking the necessary actions to go ahead and make people feel safer and better, right? So again, the 5 recession-proofing essentials are improving operational efficiency, instilling workforce agility, controlling expenditures and managing cash flow, increasing personnel throughput, and strengthening internal communication. Now, let me go ahead and ask all of you this, and again, in the chat or in the questions box, how much of this comes as a surprise to any of you? Surprise of, can a PMO or should a PMO really be involved in any or some of these essentials? Are you surprised? Yes, no, maybe?
So just type your answers into the chat window or the questions box where you entered your comments before. There's usually about a 4 or 5 second delay, so let's give them a chance to start coming in. In the meantime, I do have one question that came up. Shanice asked, I know we said we'd hold questions till the end, but this is a great time to pop in a question. Shanice said, how can a PMO instill workforce agility and throughput? Aren't those HR problems?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something that I had mentioned in during my presentation, that is something that the PMO can partner with HR with. Now, sometimes HR does take on the initiative, sometimes it doesn't. And where it doesn't, PMO can partner with the HR teams to take that initiative and make that happen. Now, especially when it comes down to a lot of project-related work, I know that some PMOs are involved in vendor management. Some PMOs take on the actual resource capacity management as a role and a function amongst itself. And so with those 2 elements in its own bucket, working through, workforce agility and bringing that in can be something that comes naturally to a PMO as well. Now, when it comes down to an economic downturn, those HR usually is busy with other things, and so in those situations, PMO can certainly take the lead. And absolutely, the first and foremost, that is an HR function. So when the PMO offers to help, the HR might say, you know what, thank you very much, this is great, we'll take your help, or thank you very much, we got it from here. Either way, the PMO is helping in providing that information and working through that.
Thank you. We do have some responses to your question about how much of this comes as a surprise. Ranjit says, no, not surprised. Ken says in a multi-part response, I think most firms would not look at their PMO if they had one as a source or repository of this sort of expertise. So he says, so yes, this position is a surprise to me.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sorry, anything else, Kevin?
Yeah, somebody else says, yes, I am surprised. Ken came on with another comment. The real question for PMO leaders would be, what do you need to do in order to position the PMO this way?
Great questions and great thoughts, right? So know that, yes, when you look at the essentials themselves, the PMO is not essentially a thought leader in that sense, but know that there are certain components within it which fall right into the wheelhouse of a PMO, right? So for instance, if I look at the strengthening internal communication element, the 2 elements that I think that fit right into the PMO's wheelhouse are developing a communication plan, right? Communication plans are some things that project managers usually do for their projects, that PMO leaders usually do for their portfolios. And in many cases, I have seen PMOs act as facilitators and collaborators amongst different functions within an organization. So developing a communication plan for the sole purposes of maintaining and delivering communications in terms of what a company is doing for to counter the economic threat is something that a PMO is really well suited for. Similarly, soliciting feedback from the staff to report pulse to leadership. Again, same situation, but in the reverse order is where a PMO can be helpful. If I looked anything beyond that, increasing personnel throughput, somebody said, hey, in terms of, making sure that you have the right resources working on the right areas, that is something that the PMO is absolutely well positioned for. Training people on project management is absolutely an area where PMO is well positioned for, right? Working with HR to further strengthening these situations. Now that again is a fundamentally HR element, but if I'm looking at just from a project resources perspective, where it needs help, especially with a shortened staff, identifying those things quickly and partnering with the HR team can, again, depending on the organization, can be a welcoming effect for the HR, or the HR might say, thank you for bringing that up to us, but we've got it from here, right? So similarly, all the things that I've talked about so far are areas which, again, all the 5 essentials are not where PMOs excel, but the areas where it can help to have that impending effect are things that are right in the wheelhouse of a PMO. And so how do you actually position yourself? How do you actually position your PMO to be able to help in these situations is really coming down to a fact of what the PMO has been doing for an organization so far and tying it to, well, in terms of the baby steps that it's going to take to go ahead and have that specific impact. So for instance, if we're talking about increasing personnel throughput, we can just focus on the fact that we want to go ahead and train everyone on what the fundamentals of project management are, so that all the people who are actually non-project managers but are asked to lead projects can do that in an effective manner, right? That is one way to do it. Let me give you another example from terms of controlling expenditures, right? Now that's clearly an accounting and finance angle, but from a project management perspective, keeping a solid track of what the internal and external costs are for our projects, those who are currently doing projects and that discipline doesn't exist, starting it now, it doesn't have to be perfect, but even taking a start is something that can help really make sure that we have a good idea of where our cash is going and how much can we save behind, right? So those are ways that you can go ahead and really prove to your leadership that now is the time that the PMO can step up in these areas and help the organization.
I can add a personal story to that last one.
Please.
I was managing a project. I worked for a systems integration company at the time, and we were managing a project for one of the large Canadian banks. I won't say which one. And I was actually I contacted the people in accounting at the bank to try and figure out what were the internal costs for all the cost rates for all the resources working on the project. And I started working out what the project was really costing the bank for their internal staff, as well as what they were paying us as an external systems integrator. And they shut me down so fast because they said, we don't want to know what the internal costs are, because that would lead to potentially some bad decisions and people being disciplined and moved around. We don't want that. So they actually used projects as sort of little slush pools of money to move things around. Project budgets were sort of private slush funds that the sponsors could hide costs in if they go over in other areas. And I was just shining a bright light on the whole practice. So certainly not knowing the costs of your projects, you're not knowing if you're estimating well, you don't know if you're executing efficiently. That I strongly think you're right on that one. That would be an area of improvement. We had one more comment from TAC about your last question about how much of this comes as a surprise. I think TAC is one of the people that's in a room full of people sharing a single computer for this, or a single projector. TAC says, our entire PMO team here was surprised. We didn't think that we had a role in any of this.
Well, I am, I would love to see if you think now, or everybody in the room thinks now, Tak, that after hearing about this, whether your PMO can actually play a role. Because I know it certainly can. I know it certainly has. Kevin just shared a personal anecdote right there. I can share that similarly, when I was leading a portfolio, one of the things that I had to focus on a daily basis was the financial expenditure of the entire portfolio, and do it in such a way where we had to focus on capex and opex expenditures based on the company's guidelines, and make sure that the finance department was focusing on that in a similar manner. So we actually had very, very regular touch points in terms of financial accounting and project-based accounting, and see where the capex and opex expenditures were met, because that is something where the organization was getting audited on, and the future of the portfolio highly dependent on it, right? So that's another personal anecdote, for just the financial pieces, right? I know that for all of the other pieces that I talked about, the working with the HR teams, empowering other people, focusing on project prioritization, cost effectiveness, all of those things, operational efficiency, all of those things are things that a PMO absolutely has its hands on, is just used in other ways, such as improving processes, even documenting processes, bridging the gaps, hiring the right people, providing the right training, using better tools, or using the existing tools effectively. Those all have an impact on effectiveness, efficiency, productivity, and a whole lot more, which all become super imperative and really tie into one of those recession-proofing essentials when it comes down to an economic downturn. Remember, when in those situations, the organization is only, starts moving fast and focuses only on the urgents. It does not focus a lot on the important, and that is where a PMO can take the leadership role and really help the organization not just focus on the HR and headcount cuts, but focus on what can it do to further strengthen itself, so that when the good times come back, it comes out as a stronger entity and unit. I'd love to see what other people in that room are currently thinking. And so, please feel free to go ahead and bring those questions up, and we can certainly have a discussion at the end of our presentation as well, right? And so, glad to hear, that some of the people are surprised, some of the people are not surprised, and I hope that this comes as an insightful element for you to go ahead and take things forward for your organization, right? And so, given the sort of responses we heard so far on the webinar, I would say that a lot of people here, many PMOs, are actually not involved in any of this, right? And so one of the things that you need to do in terms of how can you actually take all of this and start implementing it for your organization is by actually treating it like a project, right? So if you look at the 5 essentials that I talked about, and for each essential, I just took 2 examples per essential in terms of what a PMO can do, how can it help. You can start off with that list and even think about, okay, from those 10 pieces, what can you do for your organization today? Or even if you need to assess, they do a bit of an assessment and see what can you do today, and deliver it by treating it like a project. And keep it very simple. Have an initiate phase, plan, execute, and close. And so what would you do in those situations, right? So when you focus on 2, 3, 5, or all of the 10 things that you want to do, develop a sell sheet. Show just when it comes down to creating a sell sheet or a business case to get the approval for a project or a program, think of this initiative that the PMO wants to do for your organization is develop that mini business case or a sell sheet and get the buy-in from the leadership, right? See for those initiatives who are your internal partners and conduct the initial assessment. So what you come out of it after the initiate phase is you know the why and the what. And here your deliverables could include, who your sponsors are, perhaps a project charter for that, or maybe even a current and future state assessment, right? So for instance, let's say one of the things that you were doing was the tracking of internal and external cost expenditures. Do a very brief current state assessment on what's happening today, and then look at, a month from today or 2 months from today of what that future state assessment what that future state would look like if you went ahead and did the what that you are locking in. That's it. It doesn't have to be super grand, it doesn't have to be super fancy. During an economic downturn, you don't have much leeway. People's time and attention are really focused on other things. And so if you're looking at doing things, some things proactively, you've got to be crystal clear about it, right? So that is what you want to do and start off with. The second thing you want to do is, again, plan. So just the way you would plan the scope, schedule, and budget for a project, think of this as a project. What would you do? Know that some of this will come with a cost. Maybe it's your time, maybe you need to work with a team member, maybe you need to work with some internal partners, maybe you need to hire someone from the outside. Yes, it is an economic downturn. That means people might shun on you and say, well, why are we spending more? But again, if your business case, if your sales sheet is strong enough to say, if we spend 10K right now, we're gonna spend 30, we're gonna save 30K, or we're gonna earn 50K more, whatever it is, it's gonna really help. And it doesn't necessarily need to be just in terms of money saved or money earned. It could be improvement in morale. It could be, saving further headcount. It could be anything else that is more necessary for your organization or for your department. And then you have to see, okay, you know what? Great, this is the work that you are looking to do, and that's the scope and the budget and the schedule for that work. But know that some of your own time is also going to be involved. And so you have to rearrange your own priorities. If you can't commit to this work, if you think you're already overwhelmed and you can't commit yourself, or you can't ask for your own time availability from your leadership, then there's no point moving forward with this. So making sure you know how much of your own time is needed, whether you can make time for it or need to ask for that time, is important. And then finally building your team accordingly. Right, so now after the planning, you've locked in the who, where, and how. And your deliverables here could include your team, prioritize requirements, and approved iron triangle, which is scope, schedule, budget. Execution, launch pilot, implement it across the board, track performance where you need to, right? So this is, again, no matter what it is you're doing, you're treating it like a project, you're launching it, and you're executing it as needed. You keep on monitoring your risks, your progress report. You report on your, you report on your progress as well. Again, this could be, mini projects, a couple of weeks. So not a couple of weeks, but maybe a couple of months, maybe a half a year project, or even longer, right? But whatever it is, you're treating it that way. You're doing it professionally. You're making sure that people who are involved, whether they are involved in the project or they're going to be impacted by the project, are totally on board, and that we are moving the needle in the right direction. For those of you who are surprised by all the things that a PMO could do, this is even more important because you don't want to take any missteps here. This is definitely right in your wheelhouse, but you've just got to be able to connect the dots for your leadership. You have to connect the dots and show them why the PMO can or is the most suitable, apt entity to lead the way for some of these things. And finally, closure. Have an after action review or lessons learned. Prepare for how you're going to go ahead and roll this out. And then as things become better, what does that look like for you? And then tag and store some of these reusable assets so that you can go ahead and use them when things are well, or even in future recession times as well, right? So those are some of the things that you can do to make this work. Now, what are some of the things to ensure your success? Don't forget these 5 C's. The first C is commitment. Like I said earlier, if you commit, go all in, go above and beyond. If you don't think you have the time or the effort or the mental and headspace, do not make this commitment. Second C is communication, right? This is extremely important for the reason, number one, to make sure people understand that PMO is well suited for this. Number two, what is it doing about it? Number three, how is it going to make a difference for the people who are going to get impacted? Number four, how can they be engaged and involved in this? Number five, how can they roll this out? And then number six, how can they keep on sustaining for it? That communication needs to be constant throughout. Number the third C is change, right? This entire thing is nothing but organizational change management. So getting that buy-in from the very get-go throughout the closure is extremely important. And the communication that we talked about earlier gets tied in to the change management element here. The fourth C is capabilities, right? So in addition to understanding what your bandwidth is, understand what your capabilities are as a PMO, where do you need help to sustain and complement those capabilities, which teams do you need from help, and ask for that. Ask for that, because if you don't, you're going to go short-staffed and go with a back foot with those initiatives, which can lead to those initiatives and project failures. And finally, the cost, right? A lot of it requires time and effort from others. There could be actual money going into it, or there could be an opportunity cost. Whatever the situation is, if you need to ask for money, now is the time to ask for it. Do not be shy. With the cost comes the advantage and purpose and benefit of doing these projects and initiatives. What are they? Spell those out and go ahead and make it happen. So with that comes to an end to our webinar. I'm definitely would love to go ahead and open it up to Q&A, Kevin, and see if we have any other questions or comments, and take it from there.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Hussain. That was a great presentation. I learned a lot. Okay, everybody, now's your chance to type in questions for Hussain. This is our Q&A portion of the presentation. Just go ahead and type your questions into the chat window or the questions window, and I'll be able to read them out. While we're waiting for people to type in their questions, obviously those of you viewing this via the recorded YouTube video won't be able to ask questions live, but we do have Hussain's direct email address on the screen. So please feel free to contact him offline with any questions. So please go ahead and type in your questions now in the questions or chat window. while we're waiting for questions to come in, I just want to remind everybody, we do run these webinars roughly every 2 weeks, although there's another one coming tonight or tomorrow night. So we do run them a little bit more frequently from time to time. So wherever you found out about this webinar, please look and check and see if you can find any other webinars in our series that you may find particularly interesting. There's quite a few that we run throughout the year on various topics around leadership, project management, IT management, business analysis, change management, agility, lots of different topics that you might find of interest to you. Okay, so one question has come in. This is from Ken. What will be the largest pushback we should expect from the firm when trying to implement these changes?
So that's a great question. I think the largest pushback that you can expect from the organization is if you're asking for any sort of funds. If you're asking for any sort of funds in any time of economic downturn, there can be a bit of a pushback. And so two things there. Number one, don't be afraid to ask just because you might be scared of hearing a no. Number two, when you do go ahead and make the ask, be prepared for making your case. I think that is the time when people are going to be most resistant. Other than that, I think that the other piece where we're looking at some sort of resistance is if we're looking at making any sort of changes, right? Any sort of changes, which again, most of these entities, most of these elements will require. And so again, here, whenever we're looking for people to make any sort of change, whether it's a change in terms of how they're going to be doing things, how they're going to get informed, any more reporting that they might need to do, any new way of doing certain things, you might get some pushback, especially because people are going to use the economic downturn as an excuse that they have no time and they're so busy doing all the things that they need to. And so again, you've got to go ahead and in these situations, you've got to go ahead and, like earlier, make your case, but at the same time, use some sort of sponsorship, some sort of executive sponsorship, and get some earlier buy-in to go ahead and make that happen.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Just wanted to remind people of the upcoming webinars. The next one is tomorrow evening. It's one of our unusual evening webinars. Normally they're done at noon Eastern time, but tomorrow we have one at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Danielle Papillon doing using big data to gain insights with Power BI. Then on June 7th, creativity and innovation in project management. June 14th, we have two, making the leap to leadership, leveraging the 8 sources of personal power. That's at noon. And then at 8 p.m. again, we have on that same day, Power BI overview for new users. All of this leading up to our event that I really want to make sure everybody marks on their calendar, June 28th, 2023, June 28th, 2023, we have a free online conference called PMO Summit, where you'll have a lot of great speakers and a lot of great topics specifically focused for PMO leaders. So please take the time to sign up. It's a free event. It's an online conference, a virtual conference, noon Eastern time to 4:30 p.m. And you can find information at pmosummit.ca, pmosummit.ca. Okay, no more questions coming into the chat window. I think we might be done.
Sounds great, Kevin.
Do you have any final closing remarks?
Yes, absolutely. PMOs are often thought of as an administrative overhead by a lot of organizations, and they are and can be a massive change, change facilitator for any organization. They can truly be a powerhouse and a catapult for a change within the company, and as well as the improvement in effectiveness, efficiency, and productivity within an organization. And if you look at those elements, it not only becomes a cost-saving entity, but also a revenue-generating machine for any organization. So for all PMO leaders and all of those working with or associated with PMOs, and all of you on looking at this this webinar, I want to remind you of that and look at ways that you think you can use to make that case, to make that point for your PMO, for your organization. This webinar in itself is sort of a thought provoker by sharing 10 ways to make this happen for your entity in an economic downturn. But irrespective of the economic situation, the PMO can be a positive force of change for your company. Thanks for that. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our audience for taking the time to be with us today. Look forward for more future webinars wherever you found this one, and don't forget our PMO Summit event, June 28th at noon Eastern Time. Find out more at pmosummit.ca. Thank you very much, Hussain. Bye for now.
Thank you, Kevin.